15th, 2020, meeting of the Williamsburg Planning Commission to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Here.
Mr. Boswell?
Here.
Mr. Klee?
Here.
Ms. Macbeth?
Here.
Mr. Edwards?
Here.
Mr. Schaller?
Here.
The first order of business today is the election of officers for 2020. Are there any nominations for chair?
Yes, I have a nomination. I would like to nominate Elaine Macbeth for chair.
Ms. Macbeth has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? If not, we'll close the nominations. Madam Clerk, will you take the vote?
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Thank you. We now will continue with the organizational meeting with nominations for the remaining officers, first chair, second vice chair, and our secretary. Are there nominations?
Madam Chair, I'd like to nominate Jeffrey Klee as first vice chair, Andrew Edwards as second vice chair, and Heather Moore as planning clerk.
Call the roll.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye.
Beth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye.
Thank you. So our next order of business is the approval of minutes. We have not had a hearing since October 16th, and so there is a package of minutes from the October 16th regular meeting, as well as comprehensive plan work sessions in October and November. Are there any additions or corrections, changes to those minutes?
No, ma'am.
Not seeing any. A motion to approve is?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Granger?
Aye.
Mr. Boswell?
Aye.
Mr. Klee?
Aye, although I abstain from voting on the October 23rd minutes.
Ms. Macbeth?
Aye.
Mr. Edwards?
Aye.
Mr. Schaller?
Aye, but I abstain from the October 16th regular meeting minutes.
Okay, we have no consent agenda items, so this brings us to our first public hearing of 2020, being 2020-001, the request of Cameron General Contractors on behalf of Quarterpath.
Madam Chair and members of Planning Commission, what we have before you today is a request of Cameron General Contractors to amend the zoning ordinance to allow senior housing as a permitted use in the Economic Development District ED. So basically on the overhead here, you can see where the ED district is basically located in the city, which is down at Quarterpath Riverside, as we know it. You can see where the our apartments and the townhomes are being constructed on one side of Battery Boulevard, and the other areas in green are also part of the ED district. Cameron is working with Quarterpath Williamsburg to construct and operate a luxury, independent, self-supporting senior living community in Quarterpath Williamsburg. In your packet, I included the definition of senior housing. Currently, the Economic Development District permits duplexes, townhouses, multifamily dwellings, which include apartments, and planned retirement communities. Cameron reviewed our regulations and met with staff, and after review and discussions, decided the best approach was to request a text amendment to add senior housing to the ED district rather than a text change to the parking requirements for multifamily dwellings. Our ordinance requires senior housing to provide one space per 2 units, with multifamily parking requirements requiring 1.5 for efficiency and 1 bedroom units, and 1.75 for 2 or more bedrooms. The applicant provided information on the amount of parking needed for their projects based on their developments and a study they did in 2018. By adding senior housing to the district, the applicant can meet our parking requirements without constructing parking that is not necessary based on their experience, resulting in less impervious area that is not used. It also allows the city to control any change of use of the building if that became necessary in the future to require more parking for a new use, which dictates more parking in the zoning ordinance, such as apartments. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the text change. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Charlie Baverman and Robert Lewis with Cameron are here if you have any questions of them.
Are there any questions for Carolyn?
I had a couple.
Yeah.
I'm happy to hold off, but all we're doing right now is adding this particular housing type to the
ED
to the ED district,
That's
but there's no definition of what that is, other than what's laid out in the memorandum,
Senior
right?
housing is defined in the ordinance.
Oh, it is already defined?
Yes.
I didn't, well, I guess somehow I missed the definition.
In my memo, I believe I had it. I can read it.
And the key thing is clearly the parking,
Yes.
so,
Senior housing is defined in the zoning ordinance as housing provided under any state or federal program that is specifically designed and operated to assist elderly or disabled persons as defined in the state or federal program, or housing for persons 62 years of age or older, or for the disabled, provided that an enforceable regulatory agreement exists to ensure the continued operation of the housing for its intended use.
right. And so that all seems fine, but the key reason to do this is for parking, and one thing that's not defined in that section is the parking.
Parking's
Regulation.
defined in the parking section of the ordinance, and that's where I mentioned that there's one space for every 2 units
Right.
for senior housing, and 1.5 and 1.75 currently in multifamily,
So that 2 to 1 is part of the definition?
yes,
as
it's
it
part
exists.
of the requirements in the zoning ordinance for parking.
Okay.
That's already stated in the ordinance.
So the reason I wanted to review that is, having noticed that, I also noticed that in the applicant request, there was a range of use, and it was 0.6 to 0.7
Right.
per unit, and we're only requiring 0.5 currently.
Yeah,
So
that's-
do you think that's the right balance, or maybe the way to ask it is, why do you think that 0.5 is a better number than
I
0.6 or
think-
0.7?
Based on their requirements and their experience, and we can ask them when they come up to speak at the public hearing.
Okay.
They will install more than 1 per 2 units. They're going to install based on their requirements for their development.
Yeah.
So I think you're going to see more than 0.5 for their development. The main concern with staff was if we changed our multifamily requirements, the multifamily requirements change for everything in the city that falls under multifamily. And as we know,
Sure.
we've had some concerns raised on the amount of multifamily in some of the projects we've seen.
I'm not suggesting that at all. All I'm trying to do is make sure that we have the right number for number of required spaces for this definition, because this definition does apply to this particular project, but it'll apply to other projects as
And
well.
I think for us, the only other senior housing I can think of is the housing on Scotland Street.
Uh-huh.
And that's the requirement we required for that development.
It's 0.5.
5, and it seems to be working for that. So I think it works.
Okay.
And I believe the developer will probably tell you that he's probably going to construct more parking than what you see at 0.5 based on their experience. But they were concerned with putting they're looking at possibly 120 units. So 120 units at multifamily requires 180 parking spaces.
Plus,
So
right,
he's
because you have
looking at-
visitor parking too.
So he's looking at, at least 60 or 70 above what he normally installs that he's pretty sure will never be used. So that's the reason for the request.
Yeah, no, I think this is the right solution. I just want to make sure we get that number right. And it sounds like we'd have to go back and actually revise the zoning ordinance.
Yes.
In order to,
To
okay,
increase that amount.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that was one of my concerns, since we're talking about this, I'd like to just, I guess, pull the thread a little bit further. So, given the data that they presented to us, the numbers were all above the 0.5. The place, if we wanted to delineate that further, push back on that a little bit, would be to go back to the zoning ordinance and change that. And the only other place in town that would be affected is what's across the street, which is much more centrally located.
Right.
Has many more transit options, bus routes that go by. Currently, maybe in 30 years, not so much, but currently, that's pretty much out of the central business district of Williamsburg. And so I was a little concerned about that parking aspect as well. And I guess part of it as well is how this is defined as independent senior living. So if it truly is not providing any other wraparound services, then given where it's located, I would expect more people who choose to be in that place would actually want to have their own.
I think he can describe better what his
Okay.
independent living facility is and his experience with his other facilities.
Okay.
He's described that to staff, and I think they have amenities where they have a bus and so forth that they can take you to different places. It's not just you have to get in your own car and live. And I think in their experience, a lot of the individuals who live there don't have a car, and I think they can expand on that in a little bit.
And so is this classified differently than like a 55 and over community, where in those you actually have a percentage that doesn't have to be older? Or is senior housing requiring that everyone be senior?
Senior housing, to meet our definition, you have to meet our definition, which is 62 or older and disabled, and so that's different.
So it isn't like a 90% of the
age
community is
restricted.
55 or older or something like that, but you can have younger people, okay.
You're saying 62 or have some limitations with your mobility, not 62 and. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure that it was or. Okay.
Questions?
And the reason that senior housing definition with the disabled is in there is I think we have some disabled individuals in our complex
Blatant.
at Blayton that are not 62.
Oh,
Okay.
Okay. Okay, well then we'll open the public hearing. If the applicant would like to come first and speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Baverman on behalf of Cameron General Contractors. Also with me, Bob Lewis, Director of Development for Cameron General Contractors. We are here to answer any questions the commission members may have. Thank you.
Okay, we don't usually do a question and answer at this point. But I guess since there's no presentation or any answer to any of our previous questions that we gave Carolyn, is that?
I can certainly answer the previous questions. Thank you. Cameron General Contractors, in the existing 29 communities they have open and operating around the country, builds on average approximately one space per unit. Most of those communities have approximately 130 units, and that is what we are projecting on this site, approximately 130 parking spaces. Average resident age at a Cameron community is about 80 years old. The 40% of residents do not drive when they move in. Among the many amenities that these communities offer is group transportation for residents, and even the residents who do drive typically begin using that service and abandon their usage of vehicles over time as they age in place in the community. So as noted in the information provided in our application, our internal studies show about 0.63 to 0.75 spaces occupied at any given time. The 1.0 ratio I mentioned is to ensure, in an abundance of caution, there's always plenty of parking available for residents, employees, as well as visitors.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward and speak? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing and turn this over to the commission. To start.
Seems like a reasonable idea to me. Some more senior housing is something that I think we've heard a fair amount about. We've heard a lot about the student housing and how it sure would be nice if the 62 plus demographics could live in that. And so I think this is probably a good thing, and the text change is seemingly a pretty valid solution to it.
I agree. It seems consistent with what we've done in the past, which is important with regard to the other senior housing in town. And I think it's great to have the option of having more senior housing. People don't have to retire out into James City County.
I think it's a very good location for it, and a good use of that particular district. Very good.
Cut you off. No, I likewise agree that it's a really good location. You're proximal to Riverside. You're also proximal to grocery shopping and things like that at the Harris Teeter Shopping Center. It's a really good think it's a good fit for the ED district to include senior housing. And then I also, it seems like, and I'm happy to continue a conversation about parking here and later on and in thinking about the zoning ordinance, but it is nice to see that the applicant has been thoughtful and can bring some data to the table when discussing parking, which is unusual actually from what we get most times, so.
Oh, yeah, and I mean, the idea of adding the category of senior housing to this parcel seems totally appropriate, being near the hospital and, you know, all that, but just the parking ratios seem odd, given the fact that their own data says they need more, and it seems like we're combining it because we have something in a very disparate place in town that has different parking. But I guess that's, could be meant for a separate day, but internal to just the zoning for the ED district associated with the Riverside property, I'm fine.
Okay.
So is there a motion?
I move that we recommend approval of PCR 20-001 as written.
Second.
Heather?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, our second public hearing is the capital improvement program.
Right, what you have in your packet is what we normally provide for the public hearing. You have a memo from the finance director, and it basically gives you a status of the current projects. I also included the minutes of our regular meeting and work sessions and the letter that the commission sent last year to the city manager, and our current CIP and our GIOs and our comp plan excerpt, all on the capital improvement plan. So unless the commission has any questions, we are scheduled to do a work session next Wednesday.
And Barbara will be there?
And Barbara and/or City Manager Trivett might be here also. It depends on his schedule to discuss. And you'll also get a memo coming out on Friday that talks about this year's current CIP project. So, and we'll be having a work session on that and going through that process at the work session.
I was a little scared when I saw the packet for this meeting is 173 pages, and then was very happy to find out that most of it are the documents, most of the documents associated with the CIP. Okay, so this is a public hearing, so I'm going to open up the public hearing as a time when people may come forward and present issues that they want the Planning Commission to think about as we go through our capital improvement program evaluation next week and then next month. If you'd like to come forward, please come forward and state your name, please. And address.
Greetings.
Greetings.
I'm not unknown to some of you. I'm Bob Dorries. I recently retired from Colonial Williamsburg, so a couple of former colleagues are up there, Jeffrey and Andy, and Mr. Boswell is an acquaintance as well. I am here to speak very briefly to a couple of projects that are interlocking projects that are in the capital, that are in the comprehensive plan of 2013. One is from the chapter on infrastructure, chapter 11, page 14, under pedestrian facilities. Under sidewalks, there are 14 bullet points and proposed sidewalks that have been proposed for going on 8 years now. And the last one, although I'm told that the position of last doesn't necessarily say anything about priority or need, it just happens to be the last of 14 items, is a proposal for a new sidewalk on South Henry Street. Will provide sidewalk to the Oaks, connecting this townhouse development to the city sidewalk system. And my vested interest is that I'm a resident of the Oaks on South Henry Street. And we at the Oaks have known for some time that we would be enhanced by having a sidewalk. And we met Barbara Ramsey when she was first making her initial bid for the city council. came canvassing our neighborhood. We happened to be having a tea party that afternoon and invited her in, and she asked us what concerns we had, what she might help us with if she were elected. And we mentioned that it surely would be nice to have a sidewalk from College Landing, where it stops, to the Oaks. That's about 6/10 of a mile. And at a New Year's Eve party at the Oaks last year, a year ago, several of us said, let's make it our New Year's resolution to at least mention to the city that we might want to think about actually getting a sidewalk to the Oaks. And then not long after that, I happened to meet Mr. Boswell and mentioned this to him, and he put me on to the actual comprehensive plan. I'd never looked at it thoroughly, digested it, and we were delighted to see that our sidewalk has been in the comprehensive plan for more than 7 years now. So that was a big leg up right there. Shame on us for letting time go by without talking to Mrs. Ramsey, taking her up on her offer to take our concern to the city. But we finally met with her, a group of us from the neighborhood, in July. We also met with the folks from Parks and Recreation. I've talked to Mrs. Murphy, so she's very much aware of this. And Ms. Ramsey told us that our argument would not be, and I think Ms. Murphy echoed it, our argument is not that we need to convince you all that it's a safety matter, because it's probably partly on the list because the city knows it's safer to have walks than not to have walks. But I will use the irony to point out that of all the communities that live on South Henry Street in near College Landing Park, our entire neighborhood is across the street from the entire city holdings on that side, and we're the only community and closest to the park, other than the folks at Port Ann, who don't have any kind of safe access to the park. We either have to get in our car and drive the 120 seconds to the park, or we have to walk on the muddy curb, or we have to walk on the street, on the pavement. And it's a little unnerving to see the mothers in our neighborhood with the children in strollers strolling on the pavement the half mile from the Oaks to College Landing. So William and Mary athletes, track team, run down South Henry on the pavement as well. And so, again, I was told that argument we shouldn't have to really belabor because it's pretty obvious. But it would in many ways enhance our life to have that sidewalk and accompanying street lights, because whereas many of us would walk to town to dine, we would walk to Grand Illumination and back at night, or 4th of July, it's pitch black from the College Landing Park to the Oaks, and we either have to walk on the pavement or the mud. So I humbly draw this to your attention. I asked Mrs. Ramsey whether it was time for me to show the flag. She said she had told us that the beginning of 2020 would be the time that you all begin considering the new emphasis for the capital improvement plan, and that we should plan to get active in making our concerns known sometime after Christmas. And here it is after Christmas, and I saw your agenda, so here I am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Attached to this, very briefly, I came to see what was happening at a meeting that was scheduled in November or December when the Crestwood, I think, is that the name, corporation was supposed to make a similar presentation for you all about a proposed senior living facility across the street from the Oaks on that piece of property bounded by 199 and South Henry Street and the city's holdings at College Landing Park. But they didn't show, and I understand from your office, Ms. Murphy, that they have not yet contacted you all to reschedule that proposal. But I thought, if I may I give you just these?
We can distribute it, that's fine, thank you.
That's a proposal that has also been in the comprehensive plan for all these years about that piece of property that's been for sale for the last year or so at the corner of 199 and South Henry Street. And you'll see on the proposal concerning parks, again, this is from the infrastructure chapter, 11 of the 2013 plan under parks, an item, the third bulleted item, which you don't have in front of you, is referring to that, see that green blob upper right where it says future development? That's the tract of land that's been for sale for some time across the street. And the city's proposal from 2013 about that piece of land says, College Creek Nature Area is a 45-acre undeveloped area bordered by South Henry, Route 199, and College Creek, and should be acquired by the city. The northern part should be connected to the College Landing Marsh Walk that's thought of as a plan as well, and the remainder of the area should be preserved as open space to maintain South Henry Street as a scenic entry corridor. And it just occurred to me when I saw on the agenda for the meeting before Christmas that there is a proposal for a senior living center over there. I guess there's a little bit of conflict in purpose and intent for the city to say we should acquire that and preserve our corridor for perpetuity as the most beautiful, I would say, entrance to the city. I'm not hurting anyone else's feelings. And the willingness to let it go and be developed as well. The last thing I'll say about that, I learned this from Mrs. Murphy's office, is Crestwood is not the first contractor that has looked at that property for development, but because it's such challenging terrain and you can only get a very small number of units in there, as yet no one has snapped up that property. I don't see a for sale sign on it, so I don't know for sure whether it's sold or whether it's still up for sale. But I would just ask you all to think again about perhaps a legacy decision as to whether that corner on what is an absolutely gorgeous entrance to the city of Williamsburg needs to be developed, or should the city say, wow, where are we going to get the money to buy that thing? So thank you for your entertaining my comments, and thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you. Thank you. And we are well acquainted with the areas that you're talking about and the need for sidewalks and streetlights, especially the land piece, and the purchase of land is obviously a much bigger issue. But as someone who drives through there quite frequently and many times each week, at this time of the year when it's dark, I always feel brightened in my soul when I come back into the city of Williamsburg areas, because there's street lights and it's easier to drive and see people walking and see the deer and all that other kind of stuff when you're driving in the dark hours. And that's the last stretch of darkness, actually, before, even though we're in the city, before you hit the real, you're here in Williamsburg. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to come forward and speak to the commission on the capital improvement program? Well, hearing no one else, we will defer action on the capital to the next month. So do we close the public hearing? Do we keep it? Okay. So we will close the public hearing, and we will continue working on this at our work session of next week. And so there is no motion or anything to be had right now. Which brings us to our next item, which is an open forum. If there's anything else anyone would like to come forward, it's our time to do that, an open forum. Not seeing that. So there are no site plans or unfinished business. Under new business, I would like to take just a moment of personal privilege. And while we have started a new year for the Planning Commission, there are 6 of us here, and the person who is missing right now is Caleb Rogers. Caleb, who concluded his term on Planning Commission in December of 2019, but we did not have a hearing since October, as we said at the very beginning. And so he missed his opportunity to have his last time here. But I want to say publicly, thanking him, I want to thank him publicly for serving with us for the 2 years. He is graduating from William & Mary this spring and is looking at other opportunities, and I am his academic advisor, so I've had the opportunity to work with him in his career at William & Mary and professionally here on the Planning Commission. So I thank him for his public service while he's going through school and wish him all the best, Godspeed, and all that. So thank you, Caleb, even though you're not here. We have our other informational items. Are there any other points that people want to bring up at this time? Okay. Well, then we have next Wednesday our CIP work session, and then the week after that, or the CIP work session is taking over the time that we would typically have our monthly comprehensive plan work session. So before the meeting, Carolyn said that she might be sending us an update, maybe having another work session on the 29th, but we'll get information from you on that.
If commission members have that open and possibly set one for that, can you look at your calendars and let me know?
Sure, so if people can look at their calendars and get back, but I didn't want anyone to have to be on the spot, agree or not right this second, but we'll move forward. So potentially, we will have a 29th work session, assuming in here like we regularly do, or if this is busy in the next room. So the next couple of Wednesdays, getting us back on schedule for 2020. And if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you.